It started with the sirens, two in the distance, then a third much closer, cutting through the calm of a quiet Thursday evening. Sarah had just finished watering her plants when she heard them. The sun was beginning to dip behind the rows of nearly identical homes, casting long shadows across perfectly trimmed lawns. Nothing ever happened in Meadow Creek. It was the kind of neighborhood where people waved at each other out of habit and left their front doors unlocked, where gossip was about which kid got a B instead of an A, or which neighbor's recycling bin was too full. But tonight, the rhythm had broken. Something was wrong. Sarah stepped onto her porch, clutching her phone tightly. Down the street, blue and red lights flashed like a warning. A small crowd had already gathered near the cul-de-sac. That's when her stomach sank. The lights were in front of Emily's house. Emily Hayes wasn't just her neighbor, she was Sarah's best friend. The kind of friend who dropped off soup when you had a cold, who stayed late on wine nights and always remembered your birthday. Sarah's heart pounded as she jogged toward the scene, a dull ache forming behind her eyes. Her mind raced with possibilities, but none of them made sense. She stopped cold when she saw the front door wide open, an officer standing just outside. Another officer was taping off the entrance with yellow police tape, something that didn't belong in a place like Meadow Creek. The neighbors whispered, some clutching their robes and coffee mugs like shields. Someone said they heard screaming. Someone else mentioned a broken window. "Ma'am, you need to stay back," one of the officers told her firmly. "I live next door," Sarah replied, voice shaking. "Where's Emily? What happened?" The officer didn't answer. He just looked at her, his expression unreadable. That was 3 days ago. Since then, Emily hadn't come home. No one had seen her. Her car was still parked in the driveway. Her purse was still inside. The lights in her bedroom still flicked on each night with the timer she always used. But Emily was gone. Just vanished. Sarah had barely slept. The police kept telling her they were looking into it, that there was no sign of foul play, no evidence of a break-in. But Sarah knew Emily. She wouldn't just leave, especially not without telling her, and especially not after what Emily had told her just a week before. It was a passing comment then, one Sarah hadn't thought much about at the time. Emily had said someone was watching her. She didn't say who, just that she felt it. A car parked too long on the corner. A figure across the street pretending to walk a dog that never barked. Sarah had brushed it off as paranoia. Now she wished she hadn't. 2 nights after Emily disappeared, Sarah returned to her friend's house with a spare key Emily had given her months ago. The police hadn't sealed the house off, not officially. They said there wasn't enough cause for a full investigation. That made Sarah even more determined. Everything inside looked untouched, cozy, lived in. The faint scent of lavender still lingered in the living room, but it wasn't until she reached Emily's bedroom that she noticed the strange space behind the wardrobe. Just enough room to wedge in a small lockbox, barely visible unless you were really looking for it. Inside the box was a leather-bound diary, and the first few pages were harmless, grocery lists, goals, passing thoughts. But then the entries changed. Emily had started writing about someone she was afraid of, someone she trusted once but now believed was hiding something. She never wrote the person's name, just referred to them as he. The entries were filled with doubt, fear, and a growing sense of panic. Sarah's hands trembled as she turned the pages. One entry in particular made her chest tighten. "I thought I saw him in the backyard last night, just standing there, watching. If anything happens to me, it wasn't an accident." That was the moment Sarah stopped being scared and started digging. She started asking questions around the neighborhood, trying not to seem suspicious. And what she found disturbed her. Emily had been in contact with at least 3 neighbors, more than she told Sarah. One of them was the retired Army vet who lived alone and rarely spoke. Another was a couple who'd only moved in a month ago and always seemed to have their blinds closed. The third was a friendly man everyone loved, who with kids, always smiling. But something about him seemed too perfect. Sarah also noticed something else. Neighbors weren't just tight-lipped. They were nervous, like they were all part of something they didn't want to admit. And suddenly, Meadow Creek didn't feel safe anymore. It felt like a stage, and Sarah was standing under a spotlight. Then came the late-night knock. It was soft, barely audible, but Sarah heard it. When she opened the door, no one was there. Just a small package wrapped in brown paper. No name, no note. Inside it was a flash drive. Sarah hesitated, then plugged it into her laptop. What she saw made her blood run cold. It was a video, grainy, dark, but unmistakable. Emily in her backyard, looking over her shoulder, speaking to someone off-camera. "I told you I wouldn't say anything," she said, her voice shaking. "But you have to stop coming here." The video cut off right after that. Sarah replayed it over and over, hoping to catch a clue, a face, anything. But there was nothing. Someone had sent it to her. Someone knew she was looking, and someone was watching her too. Sarah didn't know who she could trust, but one thing was clear now: Emily hadn't just vanished. She had been silenced. And whoever did it was still out there, still watching. And now they knew Sarah was getting close. Sarah had always seemed like the dependable one. Organized, soft-spoken, the type who baked extra cookies during the holidays and remembered her neighbors' kids' birthdays. To everyone in Meadow Creek, she was just Sarah, the steady friend, the quiet next-door neighbor. But what they didn't know was how much Sarah had trained herself to appear calm, even when everything inside her was a storm. Especially now. Ever since she found that diary, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the fear in Emily's words. Those late-night confessions, scribbled in shaky handwriting, hinted at something so much deeper than just paranoia. It made Sarah wonder how much she really knew about her best friend. And worse, how much she had ignored. But Sarah wasn't just feeling grief or confusion. There was something else creeping in now. Guilt. It tugged at her in the quiet moments, reminded her of the time she didn't pick up when Emily called late at night. Or the message she hadn't answered, just a simple, "Can we talk?" sent 4 days before she disappeared. Sarah had chalked it up to exhaustion. Now, every moment she had brushed off seemed like a missed chance to help. Her days had started blending together. Mornings spent staring out the window, evenings scrolling through old texts, rereading conversations for anything unusual. Her laptop was now cluttered with notes, neighbors' names, their routines, odd things she noticed. She had created a color-coded map of the neighborhood, marking each home she thought might be worth looking into. But Sarah also started noticing something strange in herself: how easy it was to lie now. How quickly she could smile and nod when someone asked how she was doing, how she'd rehearse stories in her head before someone knocked on her door. It scared her a little, but she couldn't stop. This wasn't about politeness anymore. It was about staying ahead. Whoever had hurt Emily, or taken her, was still close. And Sarah couldn't risk tipping them off. She had started watching people too, just like Emily said someone had watched her. The elderly couple 2 houses down. Why did the husband always take long walks after dark? And why have she seen the new neighbor, Marcy, sneaking into Emily's backyard 2 nights ago? Sarah hadn't confronted her yet. She needed more, something solid. That's when she remembered the security camera Emily had installed just a few months before. Emily had told her it was motion-triggered and that she could access it from her phone. Sarah wasn't sure if the footage was saved anywhere, but it was worth a try. She didn't know Emily's phone password, but she remembered the code to unlock her laptop. She found it tucked in the drawer beside the bed, buried under a stack of bills and to-do lists. Her fingers trembled as she opened the laptop and clicked through folders. Most were filled with photos, vacations, dinner parties, goofy selfies, but then she found a folder titled Garden. At first, it looked like nothing but images of flowers and landscaping projects, but then she noticed a few video files labeled only by dates. The night Emily vanished, there was a video. Sarah hit play. The angle was tilted slightly down from the side of the garage, giving a partial view of the backyard. The timestamp showed 11:03 p.m. The wind rustled the trees, shadows swayed across the grass. Then a figure appeared. Sarah leaned in. It was too dark to make out their face, but the way they moved, slow, cautious, almost familiar, it made her chest tighten. The figure crept closer to Emily's back door, then paused. They turned toward the camera for a second, and Sarah froze. Just before the screen went dark, she saw something that didn't make sense. A necklace. One she'd seen before. It was silver, with a tiny pendant in the shape of a compass. Sarah had seen that necklace 2 days ago on Brian. Brian lived 2 houses over. Friendly, outgoing, the guy who always helped put up Christmas lights. He and Emily had gone on a few dates last year, but it had fizzled. Or so Sarah thought. Her mind raced, trying to remember anything strange about him recently. He dropped by just last week to ask if she needed help fixing a broken fence. He'd smiled like always, but now all she could see was that necklace. She debated whether to go to the police. But what if they didn't believe her? What if the footage wasn't clear enough? And more importantly, what if Brian found out she was snooping? That night, she barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like someone approaching. She even double-checked the locks twice. But what scared her the most wasn't what she saw in the video. It was the realization that she didn't know who to trust. Not anymore. The next morning, Sarah decided to test something. She walked over to Brian's house, trying to act casual. He answered in his usual cheery voice, wearing that same easy smile. She made small talk, asked if he heard any updates about Emily. He shook his head, saying he hoped she was okay. Maybe she just needed a break from everything. Sarah nodded, pretending to agree, but her eyes scanned his neck. The necklace wasn't there. "Hey, random question," she said, tilting her head. "Do you still have that compass necklace you always used to wear?" Ryan's expression flickered for a split second. Then he laughed. "Oh, that old thing. Lost it ages ago." But Sarah didn't believe him, because just yesterday she had seen it on him while he was walking his dog. She had imagined it. She returned home more confused than ever. If Brian was lying about something so small, what else was he hiding? That afternoon, while reviewing the video again, Sarah noticed something else. The figure didn't go into the house. They stood there, talked with someone, Emily. Sarah enhanced the volume, adjusted the settings, and listened closely. Emily said one word clearly. Why? The reply was muffled, but Sarah caught a name. It wasn't Brian. It was someone else. Someone even closer. She dropped her coffee mug when she heard it. It was her name. Sarah. She replayed the clip 3 times. The voice didn't sound angry. It sounded hurt, disappointed. And suddenly, everything she thought she knew began to unravel. Sarah couldn't move for several minutes after hearing her own name whispered in that shaky video clip. It wasn't just the sound. It was the weight behind it. The voice had layers of emotion, fear, sadness, maybe even betrayal. But what disturbed her most was how calm Emily sounded, like she'd expected it. Like she'd known something all along that Sarah hadn't even begun to understand. She played the video again, trying to convince herself she misheard. But it was clear. Emily had spoken to someone in that dark backyard, and the name she said was Sarah. What did that mean? Was Emily calling out to her? Was it a warning? Or worse, had someone pretended to be her? Sarah's thoughts spiraled. She started wondering if this was all more connected to her than she had realized. Her mind retraced every moment from the last few weeks, every interaction with Emily and every neighbor who had seemed a little off. Nothing made sense, yet everything felt off balance. She needed answers, desperately. Meanwhile, life in the neighborhood carried on like nothing had happened. People walked their dogs, kids played in driveways, and lawn sprinklers hissed quietly under the sun. But under that peaceful surface, Sarah knew something was very wrong. There was an unease in the way people glanced at her now. Whispers that died out when she approached. Conversations that changed course. It felt like the whole street was hiding something. That's when Sarah started digging into Emily's past, beyond the diary. She contacted one of Emily's old coworkers, pretending she needed help organizing a small memorial. The woman hesitated at first, then confessed that Emily had once confided in her about a neighbor making her uncomfortable. She never said who, the woman admitted, but she was convinced she was being watched. That lined up with the diary entries. But then came something unexpected. The coworker mentioned a man, someone Emily had dated long before moving to Meadow Creek. A man who, according to Emily, never really let go. Sarah pressed for a name. Liam, the woman said. I think it was Liam. She was scared of him. Sarah felt a chill. She'd never heard Emily mention that name, and it wasn't anyone who lived in the neighborhood, or at least not under that name. Determined to find out more, Sarah turned to the neighborhood forum archives, an online message board she usually ignored. She searched for anything unusual in the weeks before Emily vanished. One thread stood out. It was a post about a man seen lurking near the park, described as tall, dark-haired, and wearing a faded baseball cap. No one had identified him. The thread had been shut down after a few neighbors accused each other of overreacting. Then another strange thing happened. Sarah received a message through the forum's anonymous tip system. No name, just a note she was meeting someone. Check her call logs. That was it. Sarah sat frozen. Who sent it? How did they know she had access to Emily's laptop? She opened the phone records Emily had saved on her computer. Most of the numbers were familiar, friends, work, even her own. But one stood out. A local number called every day for a week leading up to her disappearance. Always late at night. She dialed it from a burner app, her heart pounding. The line rang twice, then clicked. No voice. Just a low humming sound. Then it disconnected. The more she looked into the number, the less she found. It wasn't registered under a name. No address. Nothing public. But it had a tower ping just miles from their neighborhood. Whoever it was, they were close, still nearby. And then another unsettling layer began to surface. Sarah found herself being followed. First, it was a car parked too long on her street, and a man in a hoodie at the grocery store who stared a second too long. Paranoia crept in like fog, clouding her thoughts. She started carrying pepper spray. She changed her locks. She even stopped going on her morning jogs. But then she caught something strange in her own backyard camera feed. Someone walking past her side fence around midnight. Not once, but twice. Always stopping to look at the house before disappearing down the alley. The face was blurry. The posture looked oddly familiar. She couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about Emily anymore. Somehow, Sarah was becoming the target. Or maybe she always was. And she wasn't the only one acting strange. Marcy, the neighbor who used to chat casually over the fence, now avoided her entirely. Ryan, with his missing necklace and overly cheerful tone, started asking too many questions, questions that felt more like traps. Even the local mail carrier, normally invisible in the routine of the day, seemed nervous, glancing around like he knew something. It was like the whole neighborhood had fallen under his spell, everyone playing a part, hiding truths behind polite smiles. What scared Sarah the most, though, was how deeply involved she had become. This wasn't just a search for answers anymore. It was a web, and she was tangled in it. With each clue she uncovered, she wasn't sure if she was moving closer to the truth or being led straight into a trap. And in the middle of it all, the diary remained. There were still pages she hadn't read, marked with red tabs. Sarah was afraid to open them, afraid of what she might find, but she knew she had no choice. Because someone didn't want the truth to come out, and Sarah was starting to realize, whoever that was, they might be watching her right now. The air felt heavier now, like the entire neighborhood was holding its breath. Sarah couldn't ignore the way her own home no longer felt safe. Every creak in the floor, every shift in the wind outside made her tense. She had started locking every door twice, keeping her phone charged at all times, and sleeping with a flashlight under her pillow. The fear was real now, not just for Emily, but for herself. She felt like she was being hunted or maybe watched like some kind of character in a suspense movie. But this was no movie. This was real. Late one night, as she sat in her dimly lit kitchen going through the remaining pages of Emily's diary, Sarah found something that made her stomach twist. Emily had written about a secret meeting, something that was supposed to happen the night before she disappeared. The message was vague, but she mentioned proof, a voice recording, and the phrase, "If anything happens to me, it was never an accident." Sarah's heart raced. If Emily had proof, where was it now? She needed help but didn't know who to trust. The local police had already closed the missing person case, brushing it off as someone who may have left voluntarily. That left Sarah with only one option: going to the press. But even that seemed dangerous now. What if whoever was involved found out before she could speak? To protect the diary, she scanned and uploaded the pages to a cloud account and set an auto-send to her email if she didn't check in within 24 hours. It felt dramatic, but something deep in her gut told her it was necessary. She wasn't just chasing shadows anymore, she was catching up to something real. And then the silence broke. Her front porch camera pinged at 2:46 a.m. A figure, tall, hoodie pulled low, face hidden, stood just outside her front door. He didn't knock. He didn't try to come in. He just stood there, staring at the camera, not moving for nearly 5 full minutes. Sarah watched the live feed from her phone, paralyzed. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move. When the figure finally turned and walked away, it was like something in her snapped. She called 911, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. No fingerprints, no damage, just muddy footprints on the porch and one chilling detail. The camera had been turned slightly, no longer facing the door directly. Someone had touched it. The next morning, a letter appeared in her mailbox. No stamp, no address, just her name written in shaky letters. Inside was a photo, Emily. Standing outside a building Sarah didn't recognize, she looked tense, like she was waiting for someone. Written on the back were just 2 words, she knew. Sarah now felt trapped between fear and obsession. The more she dug, the clearer it became. Emily hadn't just stumbled into danger. She had uncovered something dark, something buried deep in this quiet, suburban neighborhood. Maybe it was an affair, maybe blackmail, maybe something even worse. The pieces were close, but they weren't fitting yet. Why had Emily been afraid of Liam? Who was he? And why did Emily's diary mention a mask, a symbolic one or something literal? That part still confused her, until she remembered Halloween last year. Emily had been oddly shaken by a neighbor's costume, even left the party early. Sarah had brushed it off then, but now it stood out. What if that wasn't a costume? The idea chilled her. Someone could use the mask to follow Emily without being recognized. Someone who had walked these sidewalks for years, waved to neighbors, handed out candy to kids. That's when Sarah decided to return to the park near the woods, the last place Emily had been seen. With the diary and photo in hand, she retraced her friend's last known steps. And in a patch of ground behind an old oak tree, she found something buried under the leaves, a small, rusted voice recorder. Her heart pounded as she picked it up and slipped in fresh batteries. She didn't play it. Not yet. Back home, the power went out. Her heart leaped into her throat. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she forced herself to stay calm. She locked the doors, grabbed the flashlight and recorder, and moved to the living room, sitting in the silence, heart thudding so loud she thought it might echo through the walls. Then a knock. Soft. Measured. Right at the back door. Sarah froze. No one ever came to the back door. That door opened into a fenced yard hidden from view. Whoever was there had come with purpose. She didn't move. Another knock. Then a whisper. "Sarah, I know you're there." Her blood ran cold. The voice wasn't familiar, but the tone, it was the same she heard in the video. the same calm, calculated voice that had spoken Emily's name. As the whisper faded, the front doorbell rang, twice, fast. Someone else? Two people? Her breath caught. This wasn't random. This was planned, coordinated. A trap, or maybe a warning. And the recorder in her hand began to hiss, slowly spinning, ready to reveal the truth. Sarah sat frozen in her living room, the recorder still in her hand, the whispers still echoing in her ears. Her flashlight flickered once, then held steady, casting long, shaky shadows on the wall. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the trees against the windows like fingers tapping to be let in. She didn't dare move. Not yet. Her thoughts raced. Two knocks. Two voices. Were there two people involved? Or was this just one person trying to play a twisted game? The recorder suddenly clicked, the tape stopping mid-spin. That tiny sound broke the trance, and Sarah took a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. She stood slowly, moved away from the window, and headed to her bedroom. There, in the bottom drawer of her nightstand, was a box she hadn't opened in years. A part of her past she buried deep. Inside were old photographs, Sarah as a teenager standing next to a girl with dark hair and a shy smile. Her name had been Jessica. They were inseparable back then. Best friends, sisters in spirit. But something had gone terribly wrong one summer, back when Sarah lived in another town, another life. Jessica had gone missing too. No one ever found her. And Sarah had carried the guilt of that summer ever since. She never talked about Jessica. Not to Emily, not to anyone in this neighborhood. Moving here had been a way to start over. To forget. But as she looked at that old picture now, she couldn't ignore the sick twist in her stomach. The disappearances weren't the same, but something about them felt connected. The fear in their eyes, the feeling of being watched, the way they both seemed to know something before they vanished. A sharp knock rattled the front door. This time it was louder, more urgent. Sarah jumped, shoving the box back in the drawer and grabbing the flashlight. She crept down the hall, keeping close to the wall, heart pounding so hard it made her fingertips tingle. She peeked through the peephole. Nothing. No one. But lying on the welcome mat was a cassette. Old, unlabeled, just sitting there like it had been placed with care. Sarah opened the door just enough to grab it and locked it again immediately. Her hands trembled as she walked it to the tape player. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe someone knew she was looking into Emily and thought it'd be funny to mess with her. But deep down, she knew this was no prank. She pressed play. Static, then breathing, then a voice. Sarah, we know what you did. Her blood turned to ice. She hit pause and stared at the player, trying to keep her mind from spiraling. What did that mean? What did they think she did? The past clawed at her again. That summer with Jessica hadn't just been about a missing girl. There had been a fight, a betrayal, and a lie that Sarah had carried with her, hidden behind every smile. No one had ever asked her about it because no one here knew. But someone did now, and that terrified her more than anything. The power came back on, lights blinking awake like sleepy eyes. A sudden brightness made her feel exposed, vulnerable. She grabbed the recorder again, determined to hear what Emily had left behind. She rewound it to the beginning and hit play. Hi, Sarah, if you're hearing this, then I didn't make it. Her voice was shaky, scared. I thought I could handle it. I thought if I just stayed quiet, they'd stop. But it's worse now. I'm being followed. Watched. I think it's someone in the neighborhood, someone we know. They wear a mask sometimes. I saw them near my house 2 nights ago. I don't know what they want, but they said my name. They whispered it. Sarah clutched the device tighter, chills crawling up her spine. I found out something, Sarah, about the Bakers, and Mr. Nolan, and even Janet. It's all connected. The missing girl from 4 years ago, that wasn't random. She lived here before I moved in. Her name was Lily, and she disappeared the same way I think I'm going to. The recording stopped abruptly, like the tape had been cut. Sarah sat back, her thoughts spinning out of control. Lily. That was the name she saw in that old article months ago, buried in the town archives. She hadn't thought much of it at the time, assuming it was just one of those cold cases no one ever solved. But now, she stood and looked out the window of the quiet street, the same street she had trusted for so long. The same neighbors who waved in the mornings, shared cookies during holidays, and smiled like nothing was ever wrong. But behind the curtains and perfectly trimmed lawns, something sinister was growing. Lies, secrets, something that had claimed Emily and maybe others. Sarah wasn't just uncovering a mystery anymore. She was standing in the middle of it. Sarah barely slept. Every creak of the house made her tense. Every flicker of a shadow set her heart racing. She sat at her kitchen table as dawn broke, sipping lukewarm coffee and staring at the tape Emily left behind. The last words echoed in her head like a warning. Names she knew, people she trusted. The Bakers, Mr. Nolan, Janet, If Emily was right, the danger wasn't out there, it was next door, across the street, maybe even watching her through a window right now. She pulled out her laptop and started digging deeper. Property records, archived news stories, old social media profiles, anything she could connect to Lily or the others. And that's when she saw something that made her stop cold. A photo buried in a community blog post from 5 years ago. Lily, the girl who disappeared, standing next to someone familiar. Not just familiar, someone Sarah knew personally, Janet. But it wasn't just a photo. In the comments, someone had written, "So glad to see Janet working with troubled teens again. Hope this one makes it through." That sentence hit Sarah like a brick. Was Lily part of some kind of hidden program? A group home? Janet had never mentioned that. Why? Sarah printed the photo and drove straight to the community center Janet volunteered at. But when she arrived, the center was closed permanently. The windows were boarded, a for sale sign out front. She asked a man working next door if he knew what happened. He looked uncomfortable. They shut it down last year. Something about mismanagement, or worse. Rumor was one of the girls went missing and it got messy. Cops came around, but no one was charged. Back at home, Sarah sat staring at her wall, now covered with printouts, notes, and red string connecting the names and faces. She thought she uncovered everything, but clearly she was only scratching the surface. And then her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She almost let it go to voicemail, but something in her gut told her to answer. A voice came through, distorted, masked. "You're too close, Sarah. Stop digging." Her breath caught. "Who is this?" Click. The line went dead. Her hands shook as she lowered the phone. The call had come from a blocked number, but the timing was too perfect. Someone was watching her. Someone who knew she was getting closer. She turned back to the photo of Lily and Janet, then flipped it over. On the back, scribbled in faint blue ink, was a date. 6/13. That was 3 days from now. Why write a date? What was supposed to happen then? She checked her calendar. June 13th, the neighborhood block party. The one event everyone in the cul-de-sac attended. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. The party was the perfect cover. If someone wanted to send a message or make someone else disappear, what better place? She started to wonder if Emily had figured that out too just before she vanished. Maybe Emily hadn't planned to disappear. Maybe she planned to expose the truth, and someone stopped her. Sarah couldn't trust anyone now, but she needed help. She remembered someone, Detective Marin, who had worked on Lily's case years ago. She'd met her once in a community outreach meeting. Quiet but sharp. Someone who hadn't given up on cold cases. Sarah found her number online and left a voicemail, her voice trembling as she explained she had information related to a past missing person and might be in danger. She hung up, unsure if she'd hear back in time. As she turned off her phone, she spotted something on her front porch. Another cassette. No knock this time, no note, just the tape. She played it. This one was different, a voice she didn't recognize. 3 girls, all gone. All knew too much. "You're next, Sarah. You should have stayed quiet." Sarah stared at the recorder, heart pounding, then looked up at the wall. Her eyes landed on something she hadn't noticed before, a gap in her notes. One photo missing. Emily's. She had pinned it up 2 days ago, but now it was gone. She turned slowly and looked around the room. The doors were locked, the windows closed. Someone had been inside. Sarah stood frozen in the middle of her living room, the cassette still spinning in the player like it hadn't just threatened her life. But something inside her had changed. The fear that had haunted her since Emily vanished slowly burned into something else, resolve. For the first time, she didn't feel like the woman digging for answers. She felt like someone who had been chosen to finish what Emily started. She grabbed her phone and checked the locks on every door again. Then she pulled open the hallway closet, revealing a small box tucked behind old shoes and blankets. Inside was a worn camcorder, one Emily had given her years ago when they used to film silly videos. Emily always said, "When the truth comes out, we'll want proof." Now Sarah understood. She started filming her board of suspects, the diary pages, the tapes. She narrated everything she found so far. If anything happened to her, someone would know. She uploaded the files to a cloud drive, labeling it "If I go missing, read this." Her hands still trembled, but her focus was sharp. That night, she got a call back from Detective Marin. The detective's tone was cautious but intrigued. "You're telling me this all ties back to the missing teen case from years ago? You said there's a party coming up." "Yes," Sarah replied, lowering her voice. "June 13th. I think something's going to happen. I think they'll try to silence me the way they did Emily." There was a long pause on the other end. "Then you have to be careful. Don't go in blind. I'll be nearby off duty. But if you find anything solid, call me directly." Sarah hung up and turned to the calendar. The block party was 2 days away. That was her window. After that, whoever had been behind all this would vanish back into their perfect suburban lives. She had 48 hours. The next day, Sarah visited Janet under the pretense of needing a recipe for the potluck. Her smile was polite, but her eyes scanned every surface. Photos, shelves, any sign of a connection to Lily. Then, in a drawer Janet left open while grabbing a cookbook, Sarah saw something that made her blood run cold. A bracelet. Woven. Bright red and blue. The same one Lily had worn in that photo. Sarah had memorized it. She didn't react, just smiled, thanked her, and left. But her heart thundered as she walked down the sidewalk. Janet had lied. She knew Lily. She still had something that belonged to her. Sarah snapped a photo of the bracelet while pretending to check her phone. Another piece of evidence. But that night, her resolve was tested again. She came home to find her front door ajar. Inside, her board was gone. Her notes, pictures, strings all stripped clean. Only the camera remained, recording nothing but a blank wall. She sank to the floor, overwhelmed. Whoever it was, they weren't just watching anymore. They were inside her world, silencing her step by step. But UNAC didn't break her. It pushed her further. This wasn't just about Emily anymore. It was about all the girls. Emily, Lily, maybe others no one ever found. She played her game. She'd go to that party, and she wouldn't go quietly. The final piece came by accident. Sarah was scanning the neighborhood forum late that night, hoping someone might have seen a stranger or posted a blurry photo of someone lurking. Instead, she found a thread from years ago, long forgotten. It was a post by Emily. The subject, strange behavior around 6/13. Is anyone else seeing this? In it, Emily described a series of odd deliveries, secret meetings between neighbors, and even hinted at a circle of silence. She never followed up. This was the pattern. The party, the preparations, the cover. Sarah had less than 24 hours now. She knew she couldn't rely on anyone. She packed a small bag, recorder, spare phone, a flash drive with backups, and slid it into her jacket. She would wear a mic. She would confront Janet, maybe others, casually, innocently, but she'd be recording everything. If this was the trap, she would walk right into it, but with her eyes open. The sun was rising when she stood at her window, watching neighbors set up tables and string lights. Balloons, laughter, kids riding bikes. It all looked so normal, but behind those smiles, she knew something was waiting. And this time, she was ready for it. The neighborhood block party began like any other, music playing, laughter spilling into the streets, the smell of grilled burgers and fresh lemonade in the air. Sarah walked in with a calm she didn't feel. Her eyes scanned the crowd, picking out faces she'd seen every day, now marked with suspicion. Janet was standing near the dessert table, chatting casually with Mr. Clark from 2 doors down. Emily had once told her Clark used to be a police officer but retired under mysterious circumstances. Sarah's recorder was live, clipped to the inside of her jacket. Every word, every interaction. It was all being captured. She approached Janet with a smile, forcing her voice to stay steady. "This looks great," she said. "I was just thinking about how much Emily would have loved it." Janet blinked, the smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Yes, it's a shame. No one knows what really happened to her." "Maybe someone does," Sarah said, meeting her gaze. There was a flicker, a twitch in Janet's expression. But before she could respond, a voice boomed from behind them. "Sarah, glad you made it." It was Mr. Clark. He stepped between them, his tone a little too friendly. Always good to see the younger ones staying involved. Sarah's stomach turned. The way he emphasized involved felt like a warning. She played along, laughed, but excused herself quickly. She moved around the party, making small talk while mentally marking who was watching her too closely. She already spotted the same black SUV that had followed her earlier, parked just 2 blocks down. They were making sure she didn't push too far, but they underestimated her. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops and the fairy lights cast a soft glow over the yard, Sarah saw her moment. Janet was refilling drinks at the cooler alone. Sarah stepped in. "I saw the bracelet, Janet," she said quietly. "The one Lily wore." "Why do you have it?" Janet froze. Her hands trembled slightly and her voice dropped. "You need to stop this, Sarah. You don't understand what you're doing." "No, I think I do. You were trying to protect someone. Maybe even yourself. But Emily trusted you and you let her down." Janet's eyes welled up and she reached into her pocket, pulling out a folded photo. It was old, faded, and showed a group of teenage girls, including Emily and another girl Sarah didn't recognize. "That's Lily," Janet whispered, "my sister. Emily," and I found out what really happened to her. But it wasn't just one person. It was organized, a cover-up. Emily wanted to go public. I told her not to. I begged her. Sarah's breath caught, so they silenced her. Janet nodded. "And they'll come for you too." But before Sarah could respond, a loud crack echoed from the side of the house. A tire popped. Someone had slashed it. People turned toward the sound, confused. In the chaos, Sarah felt someone grab her wrist. It was Clark. "You should leave," he growled low. "You've stirred up enough ghosts." That was the final piece. The way he said it, he knew. He had been involved from the start. Sarah jerked away. "I'm not going anywhere." Sirens wailed in the distance. Back up. She had tipped off Detective Marin earlier, and the flash drive had already been sent. Clark's eyes narrowed as he realized it was over. Police pulled up moments later, lights flashing. Clark tried to disappear into the crowd, but Marin was already there. "Don't move," she shouted. Officers moved in fast, detaining him. Janet sank to the ground, crying. Neighbors stood in shock as whispers filled the air. Sarah watched in silence, adrenaline crashing down. She had done it. The truth was out. But just as she thought it was over, her phone buzzed. A private number. A new message. "Nice job, but you only scratched the surface. We're still here." Her heart dropped. Another layer. Another secret. And someone else still watching. Sarah stared at the message, her fingers trembling around the phone. The world around her moved in slow motion. Neighbors murmuring, police cars pulling away, Janet being helped into the back of an ambulance. But all she could hear was the ringing in her ears and those final words. "We're still here." It wasn't over. Not even close. She stepped away from the crowd and walked back to her car, trying to breathe, trying to think. She unlocked the door, slid inside, and closed it behind her. Silence. Then another notification. A video file this time. Sarah hesitated before tapping play. The footage was grainy, low resolution, but clear enough. It showed Emily, alive. She looked exhausted, eyes darting nervously at the camera, lips pressed tightly. Behind her, a shadow moved. She opened her mouth like she was about to speak, but the video cut off. Sarah's stomach dropped. The timestamp was dated 3 days after Emily was reported missing. She could rewind, paused, zoomed in. Something in the background, an old rusted windmill, a red shed, a specific brand of soda machine. It looked familiar. A place on the edge of town. The abandoned orchard. Her mind reeled. If Emily was alive, then everything she believed, everything she fought for, it had only scratched the surface. Clark wasn't the end. He might not have even been the mastermind. He could have been a distraction, a scapegoat. And Janet? Maybe she told the truth, or maybe just enough of it to buy time. Sarah's hands curled into fists. She felt the twist of doubt in her gut. What if Emily's disappearance had been staged? What if Emily was playing her? In that moment, her reflection in the car mirror caught her eye. Her face looked tired, but there was something else in her eyes, something sharper, colder. For a brief second, she didn't recognize herself. Was she still the same woman who baked cookies with Emily on weekends? Or had all of this changed her into something else? Something more dangerous? She started the car and turned toward the orchard road, headlights slicing through the quiet night. Somewhere out there, the real story was still hidden. And the game wasn't over, it just changed. A new player had entered, and Sarah wasn't sure anymore if she was chasing the truth or becoming part of the same web that destroyed Emily's world. As she drove off, a car parked a block behind hers flashed its headlights once, then faded back into darkness. The road to the old orchard was rough, barely lit by Sarah's headlights cutting through the fog. Every bump felt like a heartbeat, every twist of a question waiting to be answered. She didn't know what she would find. If Emily was truly there, if this was a trap, or something else entirely. But she had come too far to turn back now. As the trees parted, the orchard came into view, abandoned and swallowed by weeds. The red shed from the video stood quietly in the distance. Sarah parked her car at the edge and stepped out slowly, the cold air wrapping around her like a warning. Her flashlight flicked on and she moved carefully toward the shed, her breath shallow, her fingers tight around the pepper spray in her coat pocket. The shed door creaked as she pushed it open. Inside, dust floated through the light. At first, it looked empty. Then a soft sound, barely a whisper, came from the far corner. Sarah turned, heart pounding, and there she was. Emily. She looked thinner, pale, but her eyes were still the same, shocked, relieved, and scared. "Sarah?" Emily's voice cracked, disbelieving. Sarah rushed forward, pulling her into a hug that felt more like a question than an answer. "I thought," Sarah choked out. "They said you were gone." Emily shook her head slowly. "I tried to run. I hid. But someone always knew where I was. I didn't know who to trust anymore. Not even you." It stung, but Sarah understood. The lies, the betrayal, the feeling of being watched, it twisted everything. Emily looked toward the shadows. "He's gone now. Clark." But he wasn't alone. "I know," Sarah said quietly. "There's more to this." And there was. Over the next hour, Emily poured out the truth, how she discovered financial fraud tied to the real estate company Clark worked for. How she accidentally heard a conversation between Clark and another man, someone she didn't recognize, about hiding something bigger than money. When she tried to speak up, things started to go wrong. Her car brakes failed. Her phone was hacked. She went into hiding, but someone always stayed one step ahead. The diary Sarah found, planted by Emily, hoping the right person would find it. Back in town, more pieces fell into place. Jana had been manipulated too, used as a pawn to confuse and mislead. The messages, the video sent by someone else who wanted Sarah close enough to uncover the truth, but far enough to never truly understand it. It was Emily's plan to draw the predator out, and it worked. But the final twist came days later when police investigations led to a familiar name, Sarah's own brother, Jason, who had worked as a city contractor. Unbeknownst to her, he had been quietly assisting Clark and others with covering up land transactions tied to illegal developments. When Clark was arrested, Jason panicked. He tried to erase everything. And when Sarah got too close, he sent the video, part threat, part distraction. Sarah sat in her living room the day the news broke. The footage of Jason in handcuffs, the headlines reading Suburban Scandal Uncovered, Real Estate, Corruption, and a Vanishing Neighbor. Her phone buzzed nonstop, but she didn't answer. She just stared out the window thinking. She had always believed she knew her neighbors, knew her own family. But the truth was messier, more painful, and buried deeper than she ever imagined. Trust was fragile. And sometimes the danger wasn't from strangers, but the ones standing right beside you. Emily chose to move away, needing space to heal. Before leaving, she hugged Sarah tight. "You saved me," she whispered. Sarah shook her head. "You saved yourself. I just followed the trail." As the weeks passed, the neighborhood slowly returned to routine. Kids playing in the yards, mailboxes stuffed with flyers, dogs barking at passing cars. But Sarah felt different now. The quiet wasn't peaceful anymore. It was suspicious. She no longer looked at the houses as homes, but as stories, each window holding secrets, each smile hiding shadows. She started journaling not just about Emily, but about everyone, the things we ignore, the things we pretend not to see. Her words became a voice for others. People came forward with their own truths. One by one, the silence began to break. In her final entry about the case, Sarah wrote, "The real mystery isn't what happened to Emily. It's how little we knew about the people we lived beside for years. The masks we wear, the lies we tell to keep the illusion alive. But the truth doesn't stay buried forever. And sometimes it takes one person's disappearance to make the rest of us finally wake up." The story of the vanishing neighbor wasn't just about a woman who disappeared. It was about the cost of ignoring red flags, the courage it takes to question what's normal, and the strength it takes to face darkness even when it's close to home. Sarah had changed. She wasn't just a curious neighbor anymore. She was a witness, a fighter, a survivor of something far bigger than she ever expected. And as the camera zooms out on her quiet street, seemingly peaceful, almost perfect, the audience is left with one lingering thought. How well do you really know the person living next door?